Unintended, thanks for the invitation and thanks for the generous, very generous introduction. I'm going to be sharing my experience and learning with you. I've been very privileged to have done, I could describe myself, I've been privileged by God's grace to have done many things in different industries. I describe it as eclectic. It's a tapestry of experience in many industries, but there are certain commonalities in terms of learning, which over time, some of which I will be sharing with you. There are a lot of startups today, but there are also traditional companies, the ones that we have always known. It's important that some of those companies make it. Some of them will not. Some of the things we'll be sharing today may be the reasons why some of them may not make it, but some of them will make it. For many people who work for those organizations, who are their vendors, who are their suppliers, who are their employees, or who become whatever in those organizations, the transformation of those organizations to superior performance is as important as what is going on in the startup world. So what I want to share with you are a combination of my own experience and what I've learned in terms of innovation challenge in traditional companies that cuts across diverse industries, from telecoms to financial services to consumer goods to healthcare. And if it's not in your industry, I'm sure you'll be able to relate to some of the things which I'll be talking about. We will not have all the time to cover everything. So what I do is that I also share experience on my podcast, which is called Ulu's Fives. It's available on any podcast platform that you listen to, whether Anchor, Google, or whatever. If you go through it, some of this will be talking about, will be described in different ways there. So it will be additional resources in terms of what we are going to be doing today. So in terms of the outline of my short talk, about 20 minutes or 20, 30 minutes or thereabout, we'll be looking at the outline of my presentation we'll be looking at the challenge of innovation. We're going to look at a couple of traditional cases, a couple of cases in traditional companies, and what we can learn quickly from them. We'll look at the definition of traditional companies. And one of the things I want to share with you today is that traditional companies are much more than what you think. We will look at three big questions on innovation in traditional companies. Number 4 section, we are going to look at the 2 types of innovation and their implications in terms of management and business. Number 5, we are going to look at 3 big reasons why traditional companies struggle to innovate. And number 6, we'll look at the solutions for fixing the innovation challenge in traditional companies. So let's start. The first case I'd like to present, I shared this recently on my LinkedIn, is the case of Alitalia. Alitalia, just 2 weeks ago, gave a formal public notice that it was closing down. The reason is this, Alitalia does no longer operate international flight, likely. It's largely focused on domestic market. But high-speed trains have taken over the traditional business of Alitalia. In the traditional ways in which airlines would describe their business, this is a classic case of what we call a marketing myopia. Marketing myopia is when companies define their business by what they sell rather than what their customers need. And the story of Alitalia is that what has happened in Italy was that the route from a place like Milan to Rome, which used to be about 400 kilometers, it used to take many hours in the old traditional rail system. And of course, it made sense to fly between those two routes. Interestingly, with technology and the invention of high-speed trains, it now takes a far shorter time to travel by high-speed train between Rome and Milan, when you also factor in the fact that when you are taking a high-speed train, you are taking off from within the city. in Rome and Milan. And when you go through the traditional Alitalia model, you have to go outside the city to the airport. You have to wait for boarding time, 1 hour, and the total time it will take you to complete the journey completely has been disrupted by high-speed train. But one of the things we're going to be looking at today is the case of traditional companies and marketing myopia, where we define our business by what we sell rather than by customer needs, and that could completely blindside us to who is competing with us. And Alitalia is a modern case of marketing myopia, and it has important implications in terms of innovation in traditional companies. The second case we're going to be looking at is the classic Jack Welch company. This is Jack Welch company. The General Electric that we used to know is not the General Electric of today. If you bought a General Electric stock 5 years ago, that stock today will have depreciated by about 60% in 5 years. This is not the General Electric that we used to know. It's also because General Electric itself, as of today, as a traditional company, is struggling to innovate. And that is the reason why its share price is declining. Because largely, share price is a measure of the investors' view of the revenues of the company in the long term, discounted backwards as at the price as at. So what you are seeing with the share price of General Electric is in terms of a 60% decline. It's essentially like a vote of no confidence in terms of innovation trajectory of General Electric, the classic management business icon company for many of us. So what is going on with traditional companies? Why is it that they are struggling to innovate? What exactly is going on? The third case we are looking at is, maybe I want to shock you. When we say traditional companies, we're always thinking of Coca-Cola, Unilever, and all this stuff. But even technology companies can also be traditional companies. Microsoft is a classic one. Microsoft stock, if you bought Microsoft stock between April 2006 and April 2011, Microsoft stock was largely flat at $20. So when we say traditional companies, it does not mean consumer goods company alone, pharmaceutical companies. Many tech companies today that we know to be technology companies can also be described as traditional companies. So the challenge of innovation is not largely limited to whether one is a tech company or whether one is not a tech company. Even many tech companies today are struggling to innovate when you compare them with nimble, agile. So definitely traditional companies are much more than what you think. So what is the definition of a traditional company? My definition, these are largely, I'm talking to you from my experience and my course and my learning. My definition of a traditional company are fairly large incumbent firms in their industries. They have a history of success in their industry. They are being challenged by nimble, agile upstarts. They are everywhere around us, from consumer goods company to banking, media, healthcare, technology, telecoms, and we have a lot of local examples all around Africa. They are all ubiquitous, they're all around us. Well, certain things also define these traditional companies. One is that their shareholder value creation have slowed or declining, like we see in the case of General Electric, or like we saw in the case of Microsoft, whose share flat over about 5-year period was largely flat, from the example which I gave earlier. They are also very slow. These traditional companies are very slow to innovate. And many of them, like I mentioned, have been disrupted by smarter, agile, nimble upstarts. There are 3 big questions which I would like to answer in my presentation, my talk with you today. One is that, why do traditional companies struggle to innovate? Second big question is that, why are these traditional companies being beaten on innovation by agile, nimble upstarts and facing existential crisis? some of which we see with like General Electric today. Number 3 is what can these traditional companies do about it? I hope to dissect these issues and put together some solutions which I hope for you in terms of your industry. Now, a couple of context issues. One of the important context issues today is that innovation cycles have become far much more shorter and agile. Innovation cycles in traditional industries used to be about 30 years. If you have example in the packaging or the beauty industry many years ago, it takes, before you see anything that is so radical, it takes about 10 years of a career. Yes, we do a lot of things like packaging, different things here and there, but largely, the industries are largely, traditional industries have been largely stable. But today, those innovation cycles have contracted from like 20 years or 15 years to like sometimes even 2 years today. Innovation cycles are much more sharper, shorter, and agile today. And that's a major challenge for many traditional firms. Many traditional firms whose size and DNA, their systems and processes, their culture and their technology are not suited to those short, agile innovation cycles that we are now seeing today. Another context is that there are 2 types of innovation, and it has implications in terms of innovation strategy and the challenge of innovation in traditional firms and traditional companies. One innovation is, this is Clayton Christensen for all of us that know it in business school, so I'll just summarize it. One is incremental innovation compared to radical disruptive innovation, and they have important implications depending on, in terms of the trajectory of traditional companies. Large firms are typically good with incremental innovation, but they struggle with radical disruptive innovation. Incremental innovation is largely about the next lemon or strawberry flavor. Many years ago, when I started a marketing career, things like changing the flavor of a drink or a pharmaceutical product, we describe it as innovation. That was innovation as at that time. Many companies, traditional companies, still describe those things as innovation. But compared to some of the things that are going on today, so incremental innovation is about the next lemon or strawberry flavor. It's innovation. Incremental innovation is our innovation within the same business model, on the same trajectory, more of the same. So if, for example, you're a drilling company, innovation would be how to make more powerful drills, for example. And it's about the efficiency improvement of your product, either in terms of getting more revenues or reducing costs. That is what incremental innovation is very focused on. And traditional firms, that's largely what we know how to do. If you're a drilling company, you know how to make more powerful drills. If you are a beer company, you know how to make more flavor, different flavors of your soft drink or of your beer. So we are largely, incremental innovation is largely efficiency oriented. Now, compared to disruptive innovation, disruptive innovation is about the markets that are not being served today. Non-consumption markets. There are markets which traditionally are excluded by incumbents. By our business model as traditional companies, we consider that those markets do not work, they are not what they are worth. They cannot afford our product. Our business model cannot serve them. So for example, in banking today, there are a lot of people who are not doing any form of, who are not included in financial services today. Banking is only serving 40% or 45% of the Nigerian population. So traditional innovation is about excluded markets. Markets that incumbents consider not what they are worth. Their traditional business model cannot not unlock those opportunities. And by the definition of market, we consider that those markets largely do not exist. But let's describe them as markets where there are no consumption. They are markets, but there are no consumption. Very interesting definition. They are non-consumption markets. And incumbents, like I said, do not consider the consumption market as not what they are worth. They consider anybody that plays there as crude, and the solutions in those markets are largely they consider as crude, as sophisticated compared to their own kind of sophistication. But the thing about this disruptive type of innovation is that it starts at the bottom. This so-called crude or sophisticated technology begins to serve a student market, and it begins to improve and get more sophisticated. That over time, it begins to power solutions in this student market, begins to power from the bottom and begins to cream the traditional business of traditional companies from the bottom. Before you know it, you are going to have, and as these solutions become improved and sophisticated, they take large market shares from and disrupt the business of traditional companies. This issue of disruptive versus incremental innovation has important implications in terms of innovation strategy and innovation program in traditional companies. I will get there shortly. Now, this is a very important part of what I'll be sharing with you. And you probably won't find this anywhere. These are largely my reflections and my thoughts, and based on my experience and a couple of my learning. So there are three cultural reasons. And what I said in this presentation, when I was sharing that I'll be talking about this session, this discussion is about issues at the intersection of innovation, organizational behavior, or organizational sociology and strategy. So we are going to be talking about issues at the intersection of three key subjects. And the issues of the challenge of innovation in traditional companies, there are three cultural big reasons why traditional companies struggle to innovate. Number one, we're going to talk extensively about it, is the cause of efficiency orientation and its unintended consequences. I'm liking my words. You won't find it in many places. You won't find it anywhere. Let me repeat that. The cause of efficiency orientation and its unintended consequences in large traditional firms. Number two is marketing myopia, which we'll talk about quickly. Number three is that legacy systems serve as anchors for innovation solutions. And because the legacy systems, they serve as anchors for innovation solutions in traditional firms. They work for innovation, not what these legacy systems do not work for destructive innovation. So these three big issues are the big reasons why traditional firms struggle to innovate. Let me repeat them again. Because of the cost of efficiency orientation and its unintended consequences. Marketing myopia is number two. Number three, legacy systems as anchors for innovation solutions that work for incremental innovation but do not work for disruptive innovation. So let's spend some time to discuss this issue of the cause why traditional companies struggle to innovate. To focus on this issue of the cause of efficiency orientation and its unintended consequences as a reason why traditional firms struggle to innovate. We're going to spend some time here. There are two big unintended consequences of the efficiency orientation of traditional firms, because it's very natural for traditional firms to look for efficiency. Efficiency is about how we are going to improve our quarter revenue and profit. Efficiency in traditional firms, the business that we run, is about annual budget cycle and target, and how to beat the target of the previous year. Efficiency is about how we reduce cost or increase revenues, increase our revenue ambition in quarter and budget cycles. Our efficiency issues and orientation are also about how we respond to our stock market. If one organization or industry publishes their results, we must beat it or we must make sure we are comparing with them. So quarterly results and quarterly performance as we report in stock market are also part of the things in terms of the manifestation of our efficiency orientation in traditional companies. Efficiency orientation is also about predictability. When we're running a business, it's about ensuring that what we plan happens. It's about ensuring that our revenue plans are delivered. So the issue of predictability is very, very fundamental in terms of the efficiency orientation. And this is very important. Efficiency orientation of traditional firms. These are all the manifestations. We are trying to be efficient. We are trying to be more efficient. Efficiency is also about low risk. If we're investing, if it's risky, it's probably not worth our while. That means we will not make money. So efficiency orientation is about low risk. It's more efficient if the risks are low, because that means your revenue plans is more certain, is more predictable. Efficiency is also about a low tolerance for failure, because if there are potentials for the investment to fail, it's probably not where we want to put our money. That's the way we typically run traditional companies. And this is what I call the efficiency orientation of traditional firms. Efficiency orientation has two big unintended consequences. One is short-term thinking. We're going to spend some time on this section. The two big unintended consequences of efficiency orientation of traditional firms. One is short-term thinking, and the second one is institutional rigidity. These two big unintended consequences have big implications in terms of innovation programs in traditional firms. Now, the issue of short-term thinking as an unintended consequence of the efficiency orientation of traditional firms is also not made better. It's also compounded by the way we manage performance, by our traditional performance management system, which is aligned to budget cycles. And those budget cycles, quarterly performance, that's where we measure performance. They naturally drive short-term thinking, because that's the measure of efficiency. We measure performance KPIs annually or quarterly. Have you delivered your revenue target this quarter or this month? All those things about driving efficiency and the performance management system reinforce the short-term thinking or the intended consequence of the efficiency orientation of traditional firms. The second unintended consequence of the efficiency orientation of traditional firms, which I mentioned, is, before we get to the second one, now compare the efficiency orientation that I've described with what I would contrast as experimental radical orientation, which you will likely find in many startup businesses. When you contrast efficiency in radical experimentation, thinking is much more long-term. It's not about short-term, or like in the efficiency orientation. Experimental orientation recognizes that we are experimenting. Therefore, failure is learning on an experimental journey. In experimental orientation, for example, a radical experimental orientation, for example, we are more comfortable to take risk. We have a long-term view of what we are doing, of our investment or our business. We're not thinking in quarter or annual budget cycles. We are more comfortable with unpredictability of our result, because we're experimenting. We know we're going to learn as we go along. That's very different from organizations, traditional organizations that are focused on efficiency, where we're looking for predictability. So on one hand, efficiency is about predictability. In the experimental organization, they are more comfortable with being unpredictable, learning as they go along, performing experiment. They are more comfortable with taking risk. Is that when you compare the efficiency orientation with the radical experimentation orientation that you find in startups, the gestation to result is typically very long in experimental orientation. They're unpredictable. But this gestation to result, a lot of the things we want to do in terms of innovation, some of them may not mature in 3 months or even 1 year, and their result may be unpredictable. We have to learn along. But often they are comfortable with this radical experimental orientation, with innovations whose gestation to result will take learning and may take. But that is not what traditional large firms, because we are trying to deliver performance numbers every quarter, every month. We are not comfortable with innovations whose gestation to result may pass several budget cycles, where result may be unpredictable, that will involve a lot of risk, and where there will be a lot of experiments, where we do not even know where we are going, but we will be experimenting as we are going there. So this short-term thinking of efficiency orientation as an intended consequence is such that when innovations require experiments that are long-term, gestation to result are long, that may be risky, that may be unpredictable, traditional large firms will do very poorly in terms of those innovations. And these are these innovations that startups are doing today that are moving the cheese out of the market of traditional organizations. The second unintended consequence, which I said I will talk about, of the efficiency orientation of traditional firms is the issue of institutional rigidity. Because of our desire for predictability and stability, which is the way we run businesses, it must be predictable, it must be stable. it leads us to design our organizations to be essentially, we're looking to organizations be stable. We're looking for efficient, predictable processes. And those organizational designs leads us to design solid organizational structure, solid processes, clear accountability that leads to institutional silos. And those processes over time, in a quest for us to get stability, solid performance, stability, and so on, all the structures and the way we run our organization, the process and structure, essentially over time begins to lead to becomes inflexible. They lead to institutional rigidity because you are trying to be stable, you are trying to be efficient, and therefore you are looking for efficient process, stable process, strong at its core. All those things lead to institutional rigidity because you become inflexible over time to respond to the needs of the market. Because the organizational structure, its processes over time becomes ossified. Now, this issue of institutional rigidity in terms of stable core organization design that are solid, which eventually leads to institutional rigidity, is also not helped by the technology that we use. Technology design in international organizations is also so that in the quest for efficiency and stability and predictability in terms of our result, it begins, the technology that we design also reinforces this stability, which eventually leads to institutional rigidity. So large firms, what we now have is that large firms like you end up becoming like trailers, large, slow trailers that struggle to take time to turn and respond in an agile way to their market. When innovation cycles become shorter due to disruptive technology, these large firms struggle to get, and these large firms, because you are a trailer, they struggle to respond. By the time they respond and turn to the right, the market has moved again. Imagine a trailer trying to navigate to the right and to the left. A trailer, the nature of traditional organization, we are largely not very nimble. By the time we respond to one market requirement, the market will have moved on. The second thing we'll be discussing is, in terms of why traditional firms struggle to innovate, is marketing myopia. What is marketing myopia? I've defined marketing myopia earlier as when traditional firms, when they struggle, when they define their businesses by what they sell rather than their customer needs. And the example are the railroad companies that Levitt described. In the case of marketing myopia, what Levitt described was that the railroad companies in the US in the 1920s and 1930s did not recognize that automobiles were their competitor. They said we're in railroad business. And before they knew it, automobiles became very popular and they lost a lot of their business. So that's because they were short-sighted. They had marketing myopia. They were defining their business by what they sell rather than by the needs of the market. Just like the case of Alitalia that we saw, which is a modern case, a more contemporary case of marketing myopia, where the competitor to the domestic airline business, to the domestic business of Alitalia, were fast trains that took their business away, and this has led to Alitalia closing down. So if I ask you, what is the business of Alitalia? Is Alitalia in the airline business or transportation business? In the case of the railroad companies in the US in those days, they said we're in railway business. They did not say we're in transportation business. If they said they were in transportation business, they recognized that they were in transportation business, they would have recognized that automobiles and cars were going to take their market, were going to move their business. And this issue of marketing myopia is also a major reason why traditional firms struggle to innovate, because we define ourselves by what we do rather than the need of the market. I covered this in my podcast. I hope you can refer to it. But I'll give you 5 reasons why traditional firms suffer from marketing myopia. One is that they are held hostage by their previous good success. Number 2 is that they do inside-out thinking rather than outside-in thinking. Let me repeat that. They do inside-out thinking rather than outside-in thinking. Inside-out thinking is about what this is the product or the process that we have. The customer must fit himself or herself into our product. So we think from our product and our internal processes and systems, and before we think about the customer. Outside-in thinking is about what does the customer need? How do we design our systems, our processes, and our product to meet the need of the customer? Personal firms tend to do more outside-in thinking, inside-out thinking, outside-in thinking. Number 3, in terms of reasons why for marketing myopia, is the willful blindness of leaders and managers. When we have been successful, we begin to pay selective attention to the things that reinforce our sense of invisibility, and we ignore data that are showing that our businesses are being threatened. The willful blindness of leaders and managers. Number 4 is that we lose traditional firms over time. They tend to lose the sense of purpose of their business. There's always a reason why businesses start to serve customers, to solve problems in the market. Over time, as a business grows older, it begins to focus more on its own profit and lose its sense of purpose and the need of the customers that they serve. Number 5 is what I call groupthink, or the lack of diversity in the management team. Marketing myopia is about a way of seeing the world. Therefore, if everybody in an organization thinks the same and you don't have diversity in your management team, when the market is changing, you will not know. There will be nobody to provide an alternative view of where the market is going. So I think we've covered these 8 reasons why organizations suffer market myopia. And I enjoy you. Please go to my podcast. I have about 10 minutes of discussion on this subject. You'll find it very useful. Now, the 3rd reason why traditional companies struggle with innovation is what I describe as legacy systems as anchor for innovation. Let's look at an example. For a drilling company, all hanging problems are about how to find sharper and more powerful drills, because the drilling technology is their legacy anchor. Anything that they want to do is based on their legacy. So for a drilling company, every problem is about how to find more powerful drills. Compare that drilling company to the people or the organization that designed this plastic hook, which probably will cost maybe 1/100 of the cost of those drills, and will achieve the same purpose and will take the business on those from the drilling company. Now, the problem of legacy anchor is expressed on the corollary by what we call first principle solution. Whereas for a drilling company that is hooked by its legacy anchor, its legacy asset, legacy technology, every solution in innovation that they design is based on what they have, their legacy asset. First principle solution is about which startups who do not have legacy assets, is about they ask themselves a question based on the technology that we have today and the ecosystem and what is available today. If we are to provide to innovate to solve this problem, how are we going to do it? They are not going to use the drilling, they are not going to use the legacy asset of traditional companies. So the company that did this hook did not think of drills. It just thought from first principle. That is some of the principles that companies like that Elon Musk, for example, are pushed about. Think fresh, ignore legacy. It's probably easier for a company with that legacy asset to think this. But the question is, how can we get legacy traditional companies to think first principle? If we do not have those assets that we have today, based on the technologies that we have today, how are we going to think fresh in terms of design of a solution to our customer problem rather than being anchored on our legacy? Now, so we're running up. What are the solutions for fixing the innovation challenge in traditional companies? We need to learn from Microsoft. Satya Nadella is the new CEO of Microsoft, and I want to share with you some stories, some interesting data about how Microsoft. Remember, we give an example of Microsoft that as a technology company, Microsoft itself became traditional. For about 5 years, its share price was flat at $20. How Microsoft got its groove back? Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, current CEO of wrote this book. It's a very interesting book to read if you can get a copy. And I will summarize a couple of the learning from that book for you in a matter of minutes. How Microsoft got its groove back. Like I said, look at Microsoft shares largely flat, but when Satya Nadella took over, and began to address the issue of how do you reinvent a traditional company and make it more innovative. Microsoft's share price quadrupled between 2014, 2019, and 2020 today under Satya Nadella. What exactly, how did Microsoft got its good back? What can we learn? Even as a technology company that became traditional. There are several lessons on the reinvention of Microsoft as a traditional company that rebuilt the momentum back to innovation that we can all learn in terms of the businesses that we're on. What are the several lessons? Number one, from that book and from Satya Nadella's book, is that Microsoft rediscovered its purpose. Something bigger than the purpose, about something bigger than the organization, than itself, bigger than profit. Let me go back to the book. Look at the topic, the quest to discover the Microsoft soul and imagine a better future for everyone. So by focusing Microsoft on something bigger than itself, how can Microsoft become an enabler of a better future for everyone? That became a larger purpose, because great purposes are major drivers of great innovations. So when you see traditional companies who have lost their vibe in terms of innovation, check whether they have lost their purpose. Number two, in terms of the learning from how Microsoft got its groove back, obsession with customer needs before own products. And we're going to see an example of that. Obsession with customer needs before own product. Essentially what I described earlier in my own words as outside-in thinking rather than inside-out thinking. When you have been too successful, you define the world by your own products rather than by the need of the market. And you do not longer become obsessed with the need of the customer. Number three, detachment from legacy anchor. Microsoft is known as used to be known as a Windows company. But today, Satya Nadella and the management team of Microsoft today are refocused Microsoft on enterprise and consumer business around mobility and cloud. That's what Microsoft is driving today. That's the reason why Microsoft found its group back. Detach themselves from legacy anchor. How can this affect you if you are a traditional company? Number four, they build empathy and collaborative culture instead of silos and fiefdoms. Culture is a very big issue in traditional firms. Why they struggle to innovate? Remember, I described how, because of our quest for predictability and efficiency, we draw thick lines. You are accountable for A, B is accountable for C, D is accountable for F. And over time, those thick lines in our structure and design and process make us become institutional rigid. It leads to institutional rigidity and inflexibility. And we become a less agile organization. And we become less collaborative because those structures become institutional silos. Then number five, agile teams. Microsoft today is largely run by agile teams. As nimble, more like startup within there's several agile teams within the organization. Then number six, the courage Microsoft found is good back. The courage to kill or reallocate resources from businesses that are losing. Satya Nadella, they killed Nokia business that was not making money. Then they refocused resources from Windows, which Microsoft have been known for, to cloud and mobility. One of the big challenges of leadership is that we will tend to protect legacy. And this is not easy. What he has done and his team by refocusing the business on mobility and cloud is not very easy. Focusing the business, detaching the business from his legacy anchor of Windows. And number seven, in terms of how Microsoft got its good back, is that Microsoft managed diversity and inclusion better. The fact that you have a Satya Nadella today who doesn't have the same kind of background like Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer, the first two CEO of Microsoft. This guy grew up in India. He did not grow up in America. He's someone from the cloud business. He's not from the traditional Microsoft business. So diversity, management of diversity provides an alternative view of the world, which can help traditional firms to drive inclusion and help to manage the problem of marketing myopia. So the manifestation is Satya Nadella, being a CEO of Microsoft, is a very important manifestation of diversity management as one of the ways to manage the challenge of groupthink in terms of marketing myopia and providing an alternative lens to see the world different from the way traditional businesses see itself. So in conclusion, this is the last one. We've discussed marketing myopia. We have discussed learning from Microsoft, how Microsoft grows group back. What is issue of efficiency orientation and its unintended consequences? Do we deal with the unintended consequences of the cost of efficiency orientation in large traditional firms? There are 4 ways, in my view, which I would suggest. One is that the top organizational leadership and the board must be conscious of the problem of the unintended consequence of efficiency orientation. In a quest to drive totally performance and budget cycles and hold people accountable, the top leadership of the organization must be conscious of whether those short-term orientation efficiency targets are creating situations where the organization is unable to experiment and do things that are experimental, and that they may kill the radical experimentation initiatives of the organization, which may be initiatives that go longer than budget cycles, which may be initiatives that may be more risky, where they need to tolerate failure to learn and discover innovations that will be disruptive and breakthrough in terms of sealing the future of the organization. What it means is that this top organizational leadership, being conscious of this problem of the unintended consequence of efficiency orientation, you need to have leaders who are comfortable with ambiguity, who can drive short-term performance and drive long-term performance at the same time. This is not very common, as easy as it is said. You must have leaders who can hold virtually like 2 opposing ideas together in their head at the same time, driving efficiency and driving experimentation at the same time. You cannot have leaders whose thinking are linear in terms of either or, and you expect them to be able to manage the conflict of efficiency and experimentation. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that in terms of dealing with the unintended consequences of efficiency orientation, performance and reward management system must balance short and long term. The way you reward efficiency businesses, efficiency metrics, you cannot apply initiatives and investment where you are doing experiments, where you are learning, where you are trying to discover how to manage risk. So performance and reward management system that balance short and long term, recognizing that experiments or experimental initiatives cannot be measured by the linear incremental efficiency metrics of the traditional business. That would be one way in which we also manage the unintended consequences of efficiency orientation of traditional firms. If you don't do this in terms of the way we manage performance, and we use the efficiency metrics of how we manage performance to manage people who are in the experimental part of the business, what you are going to end up having is that all your good talents, they will get punished if they stay in the experimental part of your business, which is the business of the future. And many of them, what we'll have is that no good talent will stay on the experimental. Everybody will run to the traditional business. And when you have that, you are likely compromising the future of the business. Then the performance management system must also foster collaborative culture rather than silos, which the efficiency orientation and thick organizational structure and design have created in terms of the old institutional rigidity. Performance management system must foster collaboration and transform the organization. Number 4 is like what level of Microsoft is that organization must run agile teams, which are like largely self-sufficient agile organizations, startups within the organization, running like small nimble organizations within the large organization in terms of agile modular organization. So agile modular organizational structure, rather than the traditional thick line, inflexible, institutional rigid organizational structure of traditional firms, will be one way to manage the unintended consequence of institutional rigidity that efficiency orientation has created in traditional firms. So that will be the end of my presentation. I hope we've talked about a lot of things in different ways. I hope if they are not clear, because we are really talking about some issues around organizational sociology, how the behavior organization interacts with issues of innovation and strategy and issue of execution, and affects and defines challenge of why traditional firms struggle to innovate. Despite the intent that they profess, despite the intention that we profess, these are the reasons why we struggle to innovate, why they will get beaten by startups. And I've also tried to share some learning from Microsoft, how it goes groove back, and also expanded it in terms of how you deal with the challenge of the unintended consequences of efficiency orientation in terms of short-term thinking and rigidity. I hope you found it useful. You can take question. Thank you very much.